players kick in the door, swords flashing, all confident. They spot a few scrawny goblins, easy peasy, right? Wrong. Suddenly the floor gives way beneath them. Poison darts start whizzing out from holes they didn't even see. Their fighter gets tangled in a net, and the wizard is suddenly nose to snout with a frothing dire rat the size of a wolf. All of a sudden, those easy goblins aren't so easy anymore. They're a terrifying, coordinated menace. And that is the difference between a goblin encounter that's just a speed bump and a truly killer goblin dungeon. So you're looking to craft a goblin dungeon that's more than a few rooms with some pushover goblins, right? You want something that's truly memorable, something challenging, something that feels authentically goblin-y for your players. You want them to feel that little shiver of fear when they realize that these little green terrors are way smarter, meaner, and more devious than they ever bargained for. Well, today we're going to explore the treacherous tunnels of the Red Fang Warrens. That's the goblin lair that I'm whipping up from scratch to show you exactly how to make that happen. Hello adventurers and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan and today I have a treat for everyone. We are coming out with 2 videos every week for everyone. The first of the videos will be one of my mainstay maps, one of the A2 realm, dungeon or world maps that we've been creating in different styles, in different understandings of culture and world building. And this second video is a part of a series that I'm going to call the Really Quick Maps. Every week I'm going to open this little black book and I'm going to design a new dungeon as we go through. I already have a few of these prepared so we can go through and get started as soon as we can. But if you're looking for a way to make your maps more tactical, more strategic, more intelligent, and more useful to the abilities and talents of specific monsters in D&D, then this is the series for you. So hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and hit that like, and we can get started. Because no, we're not just talking about sprinkling a few goblins around and calling it a day. We're going to get into how to really use their cunning, their weird little societal quirks, and their love for nasty surprises to cook up some epic challenges. We're going to go chamber by treacherous chamber, looking at how each spot can be tailor-made to show off classic goblin tactics and really, you know, putting your players through the ringer. Because goblins should be much harder than they are used to be. They aren't just cannon fodder for your players. They are a whole culture, a whole understanding of how to use really small tunnels, really devious traps, really ingenious, dangerous terrain in a way that makes you, the DM, feel like you are using them to their full potential. We'll look at how to make these encounters more than just a hack and slash fest by throwing in some puzzles, some traps, and some moments that'll really test your players' smarts. And seriously, forget everything you thought you knew about goblins being easy. We're turning them into a force to be reckoned with. And along with creating this dungeon according to the rules that I'm laying out here that work with individual stat blocks, we'll also be referencing the 5-chamber fractal system that I've talked about in my previous Mega Dungeons videos, and we'll go through and explain precisely what that means as we get there. All right, before we even think about laying the first stone or digging the first tunnel for the Red Fang Warrens, we need a solid concept. What makes these goblins stand out? Why is this warren more than just some hole in the ground? See, the first thing to think of when you create a dungeon is who is inhabiting that dungeon. And in this case, of course, we have the goblins. But goblins aren't just little green fellows that you can pop out of the ground and carry on with your lives. They have their own culture. They have their own history, their own lore within the world. And so we're going to be using that. This particular tribe is called the Red Fang tribe, and they're going to be led by a hobgoblin. We're going to call him Raguz, right? And because they worship their thief war god, Maglubiyet, they're going to be very focused on how they can worship their god in a way that aligns with his values. They're going to be cunning, they're going to be vicious, they're going to be bloodthirsty. But we're going to take this opportunity to explore how the disconnect exists between worshiping a war god as a creature that is traditionally not a very good warrior. How you can balance those two things. And so because we're doing that, because we have a lot of these minions, these low-level guys around the place, and then one boss, that means that we can design a dungeon that is a lot of traps, a lot of puzzles, a lot of delays, and then finally you have a boss battle in which he is prepared to meet them and has an escape plan if he needs to have one. So the main strategy for the Red Fang Warrens is all about defense, they're about wearing the enemy down, a war of attrition, and lots of misdirection, because goblins one-on-one are pretty weak, but get a bunch of them together and let them control the fight, well, that's where they shine. And they never fight fair. They never, ever fight fair. And their lair is built for that. Separate and isolate. Think about tunnels that suddenly get really narrow, cave-ins that block off any escape routes, hidden passages that let the goblins pop out and flank and pick off anyone who gets separated from the group. Harass and weaken the enemy. Think about it as death by 1,000 cuts. There are a lot of different ways in which you can weaken a group without having them face active combat. Even a level 15 group can be challenged by goblins if they are exhausted, poisoned, confused, and they can't see in the dark. You've got to think about the ways in which you can balance the field, and particularly because this is the goblins' home, they're going to be prepared for people to come in. They're going to have things ready. They're going to wear them down bit by bit. So you've got to use the environment like a weapon. So they don't have neatly carved out tunnels and architecturally sound sewer systems. They're all about making snaking, hand-dug little tunnels through the ground, very difficult to move through for a creature that is medium or larger. The tunnels that they use are going to be difficult terrain, which is going to slow your players down even further, and the floor is going to be covered in difficult terrain because goblins can dash as a bonus action. So you can use that to give the goblins a great deal of mobility throughout a combat environment whilst keeping your players in a very small position. And lastly, break their spirit. Goblins love watching others suffer. They'll use taunts, they'll ambush in the pitch dark, they might even use illusions if they've got a shaman or a pinched magic item to frustrate and totally unnerve your players. False hope is a classic goblin move, a room that looks absolutely safe and gives them the opportunity to patch their wounds and rest, but is anything but. So the big idea here is that the Warrens should feel alive and actively hostile. It's not just a string of rooms, it's a living, breathing ecosystem of danger that really shows off the chaotic but surprisingly effective way that goblin society works. You want to see signs of their messy lives everywhere, piles of stolen junk and crude graffiti on the walls and pens for their weird little cave critters and the pits where they ferment their, questionable mushroom brews. All this flavor makes the dungeon feel more real and the goblin threat more believable. They aren't just monsters, they're locals defending their dirty, beloved home. And with this approach, even high-level parties can find goblins to be a serious challenge, not because they themselves are great warriors, but because they are cunning, they are intelligent, and they use the mechanics in the game other than direct combat. Okay, so we're ready to start digging into specific chambers? Let's go. The very first impression of the Red Fang Warrens is that it absolutely needs to set the right tone. Adventurers might be expecting some crudely guarded cave mouth, and yeah, we'll give them that kinda. It's all part of the Red Fang's sneaky plan. Picture this, a narrow, muddy trail winding its way into a dark crack in a rocky hillside. There are a couple of lazy-looking goblin sentries posted. Maybe one's asleep, the other is just idly picking its nose. They're meant to look totally incompetent, to lure the party in with a lovely false sense of security. But it's all on purpose. The real defenses are waiting just beyond. The goblins are going to use the outline of an old tower. And once the party deals with the probably underwhelming guards and steps inside to the first chamber, the passage quickly gets tighter immediately afterwards and starts sloping downwards. The air gets damp and starts to smell of mildew and something else, something vaguely sharp and nasty. This first passage might have a simple tripwire or two, pretty easy to spot, because remember, we want to lure them. We want to lure them into that false sense of security, huh? Let them get a little cocky. Let us see how that works out for them. And then they hit the first real challenge, the old gate. Now, in the method that I've got of determining what kind of chamber you've got, this is technically a cross between a puzzle and a trap. We're going to call it a mechanical puzzle room. It's not an elegant piece of dwarven engineering. No, this is goblin ingenuity at its peak. It's a chaotic, noisy, surprisingly effective barrier. The passage opens to a small, roughly circular chamber, and dominating the far side is this massive, crudely built gate made of salvaged wood, rusty metal plates, and sharpened bones. And it's clearly way too heavy just to lift or bash it down. And to one side of the chamber, there's a truly bizarre contraption, a whole series of mismatched levers and cranks and ropes, all connected to a clanking collection of creaking wooden gears and counterweights made from stuff like bags of rocks and skulls, and some levers are even painted with crude symbols, maybe a skull or a squiggle or a red handprint. And if you pull them in the wrong order, or maybe try to pull them at the same time, it might trigger some minor annoying effect, like a shower of pebbles from the ceiling, or a puff of really foul-smelling smoke, or a loud clanging noise. Because the intention of the gate isn't to stop anyone from getting in. It's meant to slow them down and alert the goblins that they're there. The puzzle isn't about super complex logic. It's more about trial and error, maybe a little bit of careful observation. Are there faint scratch marks around the correct set of levers? Is one crank noticeably less rusty than the others? Maybe the solution needs teamwork. One lever has to be held down while the other one is turned. Perhaps a counterweight needs to be adjusted. Just so. Because this is Goblin cunning in action. Unseen by the players, a couple of goblins are tucked away in tiny crawl spaces or behind cleverly disguised murder holes high up on the chamber walls. They're not there to jump into a fight, not at first. They're just watching. If the party takes too long or makes too many wrong moves, then those hidden goblins might start taking pot shots with their short bows or their slings, or they might pull a rope that releases a net from the ceiling, even tips a bucket of biting insects right into whoever's fiddling with the controls. The goal here isn't to wipe the party out, it's to harass them, to make them feel threatened, to force them to use their resources early on out of frustration. And you could always have some goblin scrawls on the wall near the mechanisms which look like instructions but are deliberately misleading. They're designed to trigger the minor traps or just make the party waste more time. For example, a picture of a goblin that's pulling a lever with a big happy face might be the lever that drops a very large, very angry scorpion. You want them frustrated, you want them threatened, you want them paranoid. So, once they've made it past the old gate, the adventurers are getting deeper into what feels like the main drag of the Warrens. And this part is all about showing off the chaotic day-to-day life of the goblins, their love for ambushing at any opportunity and all those frustrating little detours that they set up. And the next bit isn't a grand hall, it's a big cracked cavern that was once a part of the old tower and is now absolutely rent in two with a lot of different tunnels coming off it. So the passage leading from the first room, the old gate, goes straight down. It's meant to be a little disorienting. It's also narrow. It forces most medium adventurers to go in single file. The walls are slick with moisture, covered in patches of glowing fungi that give off this dim, eerie light because, yes, this is prime ambush territory. The goblins have carved out tons of small openings and ledges high up on the walls, barely visible in the gloom. And from these spots, they can shoot arrows, drop rocks, pour nasty-smelling liquids, or, if they're feeling really mean, something flammable down onto the party. These spots are tough to reach, giving the goblins a huge advantage. The goblins will pop out, they'll let loose a volley of poison-tipped arrows or rocks or caltrops that make the terrain difficult, and then they'll go back into their bolt holes, unable to be taken by any adventurer that may pop out. Remember, if you make the space quite large and you have a lot of different goblins, then they can be harassed by many of them at the same time. They're not looking for a fair fight. They want to inflict some damage, cause confusion, and then just melt away. A long crack in the floor of the chamber, which is not deep enough to really cause serious injury, but someone might twist an ankle, hello, disadvantage on next dexterity check, or drop whatever they're holding. Spikes at the bottom are optional, but oh so classic. Why not go with a classic? The idea is that when they go to cross the rift, there are 3 bridges. 2 smaller ones on either side and a fairly large one right in the middle. And a quick investigation check of the central bridge will tell you that yes, it is indeed a trap. And if 1 or 2 medium-sized creatures step onto it, it will drop into the rift and they will enjoy the spikes that are down the bottom. But they could always take smaller bridges on either side. Unfortunately, they are quite small, and any creature that is medium-sized or larger will find that to be difficult terrain. Again, more and more ways to slow them down. A war of attrition, a death by 1,000 cuts is what you want to be going for here. On the other side of the rift, it's not really an area. It's not a chamber in and of itself. It's a larger, sort of smelly side of this particular cavern where most of the Red Fang warriors eat and sleep and bicker. It's not a room, it's the ledge above the rift. The floor is littered with gnawed bones, scraps of stolen food, crude beds made of fur and straw, and piles of junk. It's not just mess, it's cover for the goblins, difficult terrain for the adventurers. Now, a fun thing that you can add here, of course, is a little bit more world building. Not every goblin here needs to be a warrior. they can be civilians. And the warriors, who are naturally the cowardly but bloodthirsty followers of Maglubiyet, who is a fairly awful god, will possibly use them as cover. The adventurers might be forced to take care of the panicking civilians who are, running around and gibbering and generally causing chaos, whilst the warriors can back off to a safer distance. And in that way, of course, you can reinforce the hatred that the players have for this particular tribe of goblins, but, don't overdo it. Another thing to note is during any battle within the Cracked Hall, the goblins will do their best to push intruders into the rift, onto the spikes, hopefully, or just to corral them. The rift is only shallow. I would vary it based on how high level your parties are, but let's say for the purposes of this, about 15 to 20 feet. Enough to take full damage, but not enough to kill them unless they're level 1. Climbing the walls is difficult with goblins above, but although it seems to be a dead end, the rift does lead to the beast cage. And here's another kind of chamber that I have integrated from the Mega Dungeons videos here. It's a dead end chamber. It appears to have nothing more to add, but if they explore it further rather than trying to engage the goblins directly, they can find another path, another way of going through it. It's a subtle way to give them a choice about how they go about navigating the dungeon. All right, let's move on a little bit. Our adventurers have made it through the outer defenses and the messy core of the Warrens, and now they're headed into the areas where the Red Fangs keep their more dangerous toys, where the stakes get a little bit higher. And the goblins around here are probably more alert, the environment itself is more actively hostile, and the choices that the players make are going to have bigger consequences. Imagine this. A tall, damp cavern lit up by this weird, unsettling variety of glowing fungi. Some are tall, almost like trees. Others are low-lying puffballs. Some cling to the walls, giving off this sickly green or purple light. And the air is thick with spores. A large brazier flames in front of a badly carved statue of their war god, and grease covers the ground in a sticky miasma. Already, just with this description, you have a fair idea of the dangers that can be encountered here in the Shrine to Maglubiyet. And you can have the same kinds of tactics that you've encountered before, as well as the difficult terrains of the mushrooms and the possibilities of things happening if goblins perhaps attack one of the mushrooms instead of the players, releasing a cloud of spores. You can have the brazier and the oil on the ground as another added level of difficult terrain. War of attrition becomes super important here, especially if the tunnels around the cave can be temporarily shut by the goblins using hatches that hide them or barricade them in. The players might have to attack the barricades rather than the goblins themselves, and that again only slows them down. We're thinking of ways to make this unfair. The goblins will have had time to prepare this encounter for the players, and the players might not have thought that through. The next area also throws a fairly clear choice to the players. It's one where the potential rewards are pretty tempting, but so are the risks. It's a chance for them to size up the situation and decide just how much they're willing to gamble. Now, I've said the beast cage is here, and in my example, I'm going to assume it's going to be a warg of some kind. But depending on the level of your players, this could be an ogre, it could even be a hag if they're particularly lucky goblins. There can be anything within these cages. It's up to you to flavor that as to what they can find. The idea is they go into the beast cages and they find a couple of goblins who perhaps aren't prepared, and something in the cages waiting to be freed. And your goblins have the choice of whether to free whatever is in the cage and hope that it hates the goblins more than you, or leave the situation well enough alone. This part of the Redfang Warrens should really make the players feel the pressure mounting. The goblins aren't just using numbers and traps anymore. Throughout the Shrine to Maglubiyet and the Cracked Hall and the Rift and the Beast cages, they're using the environment and even bigger, dumber creatures to their advantage. They're getting close to the heart of the Warren now, and you can bet that the Red Fang chieftain, Raguz, is not going to be happy about this progress. So the war room, the boss arena, is probably the largest natural cavern in the whole complex, but it's still cramped and cluttered goblin style. It might even have multiple levels, with Raguz himself perched up on a raised platform made of scavenged wood and piled up stones, perhaps a crudely fashioned throne decorated with skulls and shiny bits of junk. And he's not some muscle-bound warrior, he is a survivor. Like any goblin, even though he is a hobgoblin, he will have learned that the most important lesson of any soldier is to live to fight the next day. If he is obviously outmatched in martial prowess by the players, unless they can think of a way to tempt him into combat, he is going to choose to deliberately disengage from them, try to wear them down, over time and escape when he can, after throwing all of his people at them to slow them down. Goblin boss, regardless of creature type, is never fighting alone. He'll be surrounded by the toughest goblin bodyguards, maybe a couple of goblin sharpshooters positioned on high ledges, quite possibly a pet, a particularly large and vicious cave wolf or a pair of hungry dire rats. And don't be surprised if waves of reinforcements start pouring in from side tunnels if the fight drags on for too long. And even though he's not a legendary creature, you can give him some simple lair actions, which is always a fun thing to use to spice up any dungeon encounter. It is their lair. They will have prepared. They can have lair actions if you want them to. So you could have a surprise caved in. You could unleash a stench bomb. You could sound the alarm. You can have pre-trapped areas. You can have grease-covered ground that can be set on fire. You can have waves of reinforcement arrive on the turn every turn. It's entirely up to you what you do and how you use that terrain, but I encourage you to think about the area in the way that we've thought about the earlier areas. Depending on the strengths of your groups, you want to give them a challenge that is tailored to them and allows them to feel as if they have overcome a challenge, but, and most importantly, that they have been challenged. That's the purpose of this encounter. And being a true goblin, Raguz definitely has an escape plan. He's not about to go down with a ship if he can possibly help it. He should absolutely have a hidden or heavily guarded escape tunnel leading him out of his chamber. And I'm going to put one at the back over here. All right, so we've dragged ourselves through the deceptive entrance. We've picked our way through the trap-filled narrows, hopefully outsmarted a dead end or two, braved a hazardous fungus forest, weighed some pretty risky choices, and fingers crossed, faced down Raguz in his lair. So, what makes the Warrens more than just a jumble of rooms? It's really about how these pieces work together to create an experience that's both a cohesive and genuinely challenging encounter. And the main idea that we're using here is intelligence. It's cunning. It's not just about direct combat. It's about how you can use an environment as well as what you know about the lore and abilities of a given creature within D&D and created an experience that challenges them in more than just putting a figure on your terrain and hoping for the best. Thinking about goblins as being small creatures that can dash and disengage as a bonus action, that have a lot of time to prepare traps, that are particularly bloodthirsty and known for their cunning, allows you to create this feeling of mounting pressure over time as a war of attrition slowly takes off. More and more, not only of their health, but of their abilities, of their spell slots, of their patience as they go through. So, what are your absolute favorite goblin tactics to spring on unsuspecting players? Have you ever had a goblin encounter go completely sideways in a way that was hilarious, or maybe even a little terrifying? I want to hear all about it. Share your stories and your most devious goblin trap in the comments below. I genuinely love to read them. And hey, if you found this guide to designing the Warrens useful, if you're hungry for more tips on how to create memorable monsters and treacherous dungeons and epic campaigns, then you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, help get this message out to more and more D&D players as we go through. I've got a whole series of these ideas that I'm going to be testing out over the next few weeks to see whether or not you're going to enjoy them. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Ideas not only for how to design specific monster traps, but specific environments so that you, as a DM, perhaps you're new to the game, perhaps you're an old hand, but you can find new ideas, new inspirations to creating a world that is challenging and exciting for your players. And look, designing a truly killer goblin dungeon, something like the Redfang Warrens, isn't just about throwing a bunch of monsters into a room. It's about really getting what makes the goblins goblins. Their cunning, their cruelty, their amazing resourcefulness, and frankly, surprising ability to turn their messy, ramshackle lairs into actual death traps. And if you focus on their unique tactics, really use the environment to your advantage and string together a series of challenges that escalate in smart, sneaky ways, you can turn these often underestimated little guys into genuinely terrifying and thrilling experiences for your players. And the Red Fang Warrens is really just one example of a way that you can create a goblin environment. But I really want to hear what you think in the comments below. If you want to check out this dungeon, it is on the Red Quills Patreon channel. You can check out the link in the description below. You can download what I've written up about it. It's also going to be attached to the Atlas of Endon. The video that I released earlier in this week is about how to create adventure tidbits little prompts for you to stick into your world building notes to help you create encounters like this that you can then later on come back to, even if you've forgotten all the details about, and then tailor it to the level of your players. And that's what we're going for here, creating something that is not necessarily about creating something that is for the level of your players. It's about thinking about the monsters that you're facing. And then you can tailor the damage to your players and not the experience, if you get what I mean. Thanks particularly to my Discord and Patreon and YouTube members. It's fantastic to have this community around me. I'm going to be trying to create more and more videos as we go through. We've just hit 10K subscribers, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to create this channel. So I will see you next week for our next dungeon, but until then, happy adventuring, and I'll see you then. Today, that's what we're going to be exploring with the Red Fang Warrens, a treacherous... Well, today we're going to explore the treacherous tunnels of the Red Fang Warrens. That's the Goblin.